listeners. I'm so used to making player announcements that I completely forget when I'm not actually talking to players. So, hello, viewers, and welcome back for this second match of the evening. This time we have Peter Geernaert versus Ruud Merks. We saw Peter in the previous round winning the match, even though he had to mulligan to 4 in one game. So, he did win the two other games to clinch the match. Now we're in the quarterfinals. There's not much at stake here. We're mostly doing this to provide a few matches on camera for people who are interested in the format or who are preparing for the final event that we have on September 17th. That's getting pretty close. Uh, Peter, if you didn't know, is on a green-black mid-range style rock deck that's built around Bloodbriar and the ability to sacrifice a bunch of artifacts, while Ruud is on blue-white tempo. So a deck built around Essence Flux and Abusing comes into ability effects. Let's hope both players have decent opening hands and we can get into the game as soon as possible. Okay, finally a little life in the comments, in the chat section. Don't hesitate to support your favorite player or remind me how goddamn sexy my voice is. And let's get into this game. We have a few technical difficulties. For some reason the camera quality isn't that good, and unfortunately we don't have access to the good microphone we usually have. So I do apologize for that. Peter again going to sideboarding. A little bit about Ruud's deck, because we have already seen Peter's in action. It's the blue-white um, tempo deck, is mostly built around Reflector Mage, the 2-3. When it comes into play you get to return a creature your opponents control to their hand, and to their hand, and then next turn they're not allowed to play it. So Peter deciding to keep his 6-card hand. I guess he's saving up his opening hand luck for later rounds when he might need it more. But don't underestimate Ruud. He's a pretty formidable opponent and has been high in the standings ever since we actually had standings. So solid player with a solid, if a bit mainstream deck. Peter attacking with his blister pot here. Um, unless he really needed that Scion, I don't think you do that here. Uh, the Inspector is quite literally fodder, and Ruud will, or should at least, almost always block. So we have supporters for Throb Inspector rather than players. I can get behind that. So apparently Peter does have some mana issues and might actually have needed the Scion to get on the board on turn 3. But apparently Ruud is also stuck on 2 lands. But his deck is a lot more capable of putting pressure on an opponent with just 2 mana. Peter drawing a land here. It's an evolving wild, so he still can't cast any 3-drops this turn. And Ruud mirroring the development, but on his side it is a land that comes into play untapped. and can actually threaten something new here. Topen free blades. I don't really understand why Ruud isn't just attacking with them. I think he already has the flaying tendrils in hand. That's a disperse on the Scion Summoner. Oh, you think the guy who was with me last time was handsome? He's actually the sexiest beast I've ever had next to me. So this isn't the draft deck. This is Gentry. It's a budget version of standard. Yeah. So it's already in the chat. You're allowed to play up to 4 individually different rares and/or mythics, and up to 15 uncommons. Yeah, good explanation in the chat. In the meantime, Peter got his board pretty much deleted, but if I'm not mistaken, he has the flaying tendrils in his hand to clear all but one token free blade. Yeah, he is holding it. He's pretty much forced to play it here, since otherwise... okay. Apparently Peter has an alternative plan, or I'm misreading a card in his hands. I'm curious to see what his plan here is. Ruud has a Reflector Mage to keep the Scion Summoner off the table. It's not the best target for it, since every time you bounce it, you're also giving him an extra Scion. Okay, using using the Scion to make sure that the second free blade doesn't get renowned as well. But Peter's under a lot of pressure here, and not sure that he's well equipped to deal with it at this point. Yeah, this flaying tendrils. The problem is that this flaying tendrils does just as much as it would have done the previous turn, but then he wouldn't have given Ruud a good target for his Reflector Mage, and he would still have the Scion Summoner. So I would have liked. I think playing the Flaying Tendrils a turn earlier would have been more interesting. And a third Topen Free Blade hits the board for Ruud. Peter trying his best to stay on the board with some presence here, but is struggling pretty heavily at this point. Ruud has the Essence Flux to bounce his Reflector Mage and get another use out of the ability, but he decides to go on the just to go on the offensive. But Flaying Tendrils barely does something. The problem with Flaying Tendrils is it doesn't deal with the 3 toughness creatures. So in that scenario, the only interesting thing is being able to attack with Scions, Ruud blocking with 3 toughness creatures and being able to play the Flying Tendrils after. but that's a scenario that is very unlikely to happen. Ruud playing another Thraben Inspector, and Peter again forced to fill the board or die. Tapped out. So this is pretty much an open concession. Yes, he is playing tendrils. He already played one. Um, I think he's playing three of them. Let me have a quick look at his deck list here. Um, yeah, three flaying tendrils in the main deck. Yeah, it's not optimal, but it flaying tendrils is just so good in this format that Peter felt himself forced to do it in order to be able to feign weakness, let players fill the board, which they do a lot. Okay, and we're going into sideboarding. For Ruud, we have in his sideboard 4 pacifisms, 2 Felidar Cubs, 2 Stitched Manglers, 1 Angelic Purge, because he has 2 in his main deck already, 2 Negates, 1 Dispel, 1 Disperse, and 2 Spell Shrivels. It's interesting actually. Pretty much every card in his sideboard, except maybe the Felidar Cub, could come in here. Um, the Dispel and the Negate aren't that interesting, but there are scenarios in which it could be good. For for Peter, in the meantime, we still have the same thing: 4 Caustic Caterpillars that do nothing in this matchup. Um, 4 aerial volleys that have pretty limited targets, 3 bone splinters that are never really trading up into something, and 4 duress that don't really hit some of the more problematic cards in Ruud's deck. So I would say that Peter isn't that well equipped. Yeah, but the bone splinters really aren't that interesting. There isn't really this big unreachable threat coming out of Ruud, and except um, 3 of his rares and mythics that you wouldn't be able to deal with a more flexible removal spell. That said, it's another sacrifice outlet for his Zulaport Cutthroats and Bloodbriar, since he's not playing Nantuko Husk, um, so he has very little control over when he actually gets to sacrifice his non-scion creatures. It's better than nothing, I agree. Not sure if it's better than any card in his main deck though. Is there something you'd want to board out? Not really. There's nothing obvious you want to board out for bone splinters. I actually like the the Treadopons, the +2/+2 trample instance, because this is a matchup of 2/3s, and this lets you attack into their 2/3s without fearing double blocks. And because you go to 5 toughness, and you're actually killing and trampling over if they single block, or killing one and surviving if they double block. So it's a pretty big deal. I think it's a bigger deal to have those than to have a removal, even if bounce is really painful when it gets played in response. So let's update the score here. Sorry, was a bit too lost in sideboarding and potentials here. So Rudmerks wins game one with a lot of pressure and quite a stumble from Peter, who also had to mulligan to down to 6 cards. And we are shuffling up for game two. In the meantime, our finalist has arrived as well, so he'll be ready to fight whoever wins the next this match and the next match. That's Tim Matthijs, who played green-red landfall up to now. Um, that's not. That doesn't mean he has to play it again in the finals, as players are allowed to change their decks between every round for this little event. Like we mentioned before, this is mostly to showcase a bit of the meta game, so we want to encourage players changing decks rather than sticking to a single deck. So both players looking at their opening 7, I think. Yeah, and keeping them. And we're on the board with a blister pot for Peter. A evolving wilds for Ruud, so he should be quite comfortable in his mana. Peter doubling up with blister pots. Um, Noticeable is that he doesn't play Loam Dryads, which is the one card that's often featured in this base green decks that allows the deck to easily splash a third color um, or accelerate. Like we said before, these Gentry decks do have an issue from time to time with stability and getting your mana. So even for a 2 color deck, a card like Loam Dryad is pretty valuable. So no Token Free Blades for Ruud. That's a pretty stark contrast with the previous game, where he had 3 of them. Token Free Blade being pretty much a cornerstone of white aggro decks in this format. And Ruud is down to 17. I assume Peter said go because this is Ruud playing Anticipate. Not sure what Peter has in his hand. His deck is completely full of good 3 drops. And Ruud chose to get the Reflector Mage from that hand. Yeah, there is a Smother Abomination in that hand. Flaying Tendrils. I disagree with this play from Peter, but I do think he has the straddle pawn this time. He picked a Reflector Mage instead of the Token. Okay, so now we are set. I can't see what the back card in Peter's hand is. What we do see is that Ruud has the Dispel, so he has the counter for the pump spells, but he chooses to tap out for a Nibulus of Frost. So 3/3 flying prowess, and whenever he plays an instance or a sorcery, he gets to tap one of Peter's creatures and it doesn't untap. Peter drawing a second Flaying Tendrils that could prove to be extremely relevant very late in the game if Peter gets to 6 mana, because a double tendrils will take out all but no, no, actually everything in Ruud's deck, and Peter gets to go on the offensive, again representing the pump spell. Ruud taking the safe route here, and lets the summoner die. Yeah, it kills everything he has as well, but like you mentioned earlier, you can play around that because you know it's coming, and usually your opponent isn't. Now, good players will play around that and try not to commit too much to the board. So, Peter looking at his options, and he decides to go for a flaying tendril. I disagree with that. Uh, I really don't like this play from him. I think the better play would have been to just sacrifice the Scion to put the Smothering Abomination in play. Ruud getting onto the offensive here for the first time, and is starting to fill the board from his side. So now Peter doesn't have the option anymore to go into Smothering Abomination, and goes with Flaying Tendrils again. Loses 2 cards of his own because the keep forgetting what the little guy is called. The Blister Pod doesn't even make his Scion, and it just gets rid of the Whirler Rogue. And still leaving the Niblis in play, which will turn out to be the main problem for Peter. Life totals equal on 14, and Ruud firmly in control with an evasive creature and spells to control whatever Peter might be throwing at him. So try to imagine what this game would have looked like if um, Peter went for the Smothering Abomination the turn he played the first Flying Tendrils. He would have had Blister Pot to sacrifice to the Smothering Abomination, and then follow up with another Blister Pot and another and something else, having the option to draw an extra card, have sacrificial fodder available, and now all Ruud needs to do is either tap it with the Nibilis or not attack for 1 turn, and Peter pretty much just paid 4 mana to draw a card the next turn. I don't think this is necessary, but just not attacking for 1 turn. He would have reached about the same goal. Of course, Ruud does have a big follow-up, and has 8 power of creatures in play now, yeah, because he has a full hand. Um, this is actually lethal, and I think Ruud can get rid of pretty much any blocker. Yeah, you would get a card if you sacrifice Smothering Abomination, but I don't think the game will get to that point. Peter has to play the Bone Splinters here. He has to play the Bone Splinters to have a chance to stay alive. Now he can block the Scion with his own. And only takes 4 damage. But Ruud's firmly in control. He still has a Disperse and an Essence Flux. And 2 other cards that I can't read. So I'm afraid that Peter is going to bite the dust here, and we'll see a Ruud Friedrich in the semifinals. Yeah, Ruud offering up the trade. I'm not even sure that Peter should take the trade, because yeah, he can follow up with a Smothering Abomination now, and having the Scion in play actually helps him more. So from Peter's perspective, this looks like he can make a board state where he goes to 1 or 2 trades and then sacrifices the Smothering Abomination to draw a card, but I'm afraid that's never gonna happen. Essence Flux on the Reflector Mage, getting rid of the Smothering Abomination. In response, Peter sacrifices his sign. Ruud even has a Celestial Purge. And Peter concedes, so we have Ruud versus Frederik in the semi-finals to see who gets to take it up with Tim Matthijs in the finals. We'll be switching back to music. So watch out with your microphones, and we'll see you again in a couple of minutes.